This is Join Us in France, episode 165. This episode is brought to you in part by Patreon supporters and Addicted to France, the tour company that specializes in small group tours in France. Bonjour everybody, I'm Annie, and on today's show we're talking about the Loire Valley with Nancy Caulkins. But first, let me introduce myself a little bit. My name is Annie Sargent, and Join Us in France is the only travel show exclusively dedicated to helping you prepare your big trip to France. You may not hear it right away because I don't sound like your standard French person speaking English, but if you listen long enough, you'll hear my accent. I was born and raised in France, and then I went to the US for college and ended up staying for 20 years. But I've been back living in France for over a decade now, and when I came back, I decided that I needed to discover my own country, and then decided that I needed to bring perfect strangers along through this podcast, and it's been very fun. On today's episode, I talked to Nancy Caulkins, who has been listening to the podcast and used tips she heard on the show to craft her own trip to France. Then she decided to give back and spent a couple of hours with me talking about her trip. Her son Henry talked to me also, and you can hear his tips for visiting France with teenagers on episode 159. Join Us in France is a listener-supported show, both by the listeners who share their thoughts on the show and those who support it financially. So thank you, Nancy, and to all the other people who have come on the show, and thank you also, Patreon supporters. Stay tuned after the interview to hear my thanks to listeners who support the show on Patreon, my personal update, news about our tours, and the French tip of the week. And now here's the interview.
Ouais.
Welcome to Join Us in France.
Bonjour, thank you.
Bonjour. Thank you so much for talking to me. Today, we are going to talk about your experience in Normandy. Before we get to that, tell us a little bit about yourself, about your family, about why you decided to come to France, whatever else you want to share.
Okay. We live in Phoenix, Arizona, my husband Ian and I, and our two children, Henry, who's 13, and Claire, who's now 11.
Yeah.
And they keep us busy, of course. We used to live on the East Coast, but we are now out in the desert, and I am always longing, so is my husband, we're always longing for culture, international experiences. We lived in DC for a long time, and I grew up in Philadelphia. So that history and that architecture and those cultural experiences, we miss that a little bit being out west. We love it, but we miss that piece. So anytime we get a chance to travel, we do. Mm-hmm. And we got lucky this year. We found a really great airfare deal. And so we opted to go to Europe, and my husband chose France, which I was really surprised and excited about. So I wasn't sure that he would like that. I have been 10 years ago, but he came along this time, and he was really excited. So we chose France.
Great. And did you either one of you speak French?
We both took it in high school, and I thought it would come back, and a lot of it did. But only when I was speaking to a friend of mine who's Spanish, like all my French came up.
Oh, wow.
So none of my Spanish came back when I needed to talk to a Spanish-speaking person, and my French did. But that was about it, unfortunately.
That happens to a lot of people. When you're in a situation where a foreign language is required, the wrong one comes up.
Yes. It was very baffling, but we muddled through. We made it through. I mean, it was, it definitely helped that we had the background of French just to be able to read certain signs or get certain information or convey a very basic concept to a person at a store or wherever.
Yeah. And that wasn't a big hindrance. I mean, you were able to get around and get what you needed done.
No.
That's cool.
My daughter said, I was surprised how many people spoke English. Pretty much everybody, particularly in Paris, pretty much everybody spoke English.
Yeah, that's very true. All right, so
Yes.
let's talk about Normandy.
Yes.
What inspired you to go to Normandy to begin with?
Well, we have my dad is a huge history buff, as well as our son. He's very interested in World War II, has been since he was like 5. We
Wow.
don't really know why. It could be because of his grandfather. And so it just was an area of interest. And my husband is very fascinated by the whole thing too. So we put Normandy on the list and thought it was it's an easy way to go from Paris out to Normandy and kind of make that loop that we did back through the Loire Valley. So Normandy was a logical place.
Yeah.
And we totally randomly landed there on D-Day. So
Oh, that was random?
I mean, yes, we booked the trip, and then in working it out logistically, that was the most logical route, and we happened to be there on June 6th.
Oh, wow.
So we got really lucky and got to see some ceremonies. I mean, we did see ceremonies in Arromanches, and there were bands, bagpipes. There were definitely veterans there.
Yeah.
Not very many, just a few left, but there were
Wow.
veterans there. There were French Army, British Army, and American Army. We're not sure if they were French people dressed up in American and British attire, or if they really were people from the other countries who were celebrating. We weren't really sure, because we'd see somebody walk by in an American uniform, but they'd be speaking French. So we were a little confused.
Yeah,
but
probably those were people who just wanted to, I guess, honor the uniform, or was a special
reenactors.
occasion. Yeah, reenactors or
Right.
something. Yeah.
Right.
That's cool. So what else did you do in Normandy?
In Normandy, well, we definitely did we toyed with the idea of hiring a guide and having a tour, but honestly, my son and my husband are so knowledgeable about World War II and Normandy. We just used the two of them as our tour guides.
Yeah.
And they did a great job.
Good.
So we drove originally through all the little towns, just along the coast there, all the sur-mers, Lyon-sur-Mer, Luc-sur-Mer. We did a drive through those, which was really nice because they're charming little towns. And that was, just not a ton of history that we experienced in those, but it was just a very nice visual to kind of see how these people lived and what the towns were like.
Yeah.
And then we landed in our home for the night in Normandy was, first we did Beuvron-en-Auge, which was the little town in the on the cider route. But then when we were up in Normandy, we were on Anel, I think it's called, Asnelles.
Anselles. Ancelle.
Well, it's actually Asnelles. So I think the S is silent. Is that right? Anel? Asnelles. It's very close to Arromanches. So it's a little spot on Gold Beach.
Anel, sorry.
There you go.
Anel,
well, no, you can say it properly, and I cannot.
My problem is I can't spell.
I'm not helping. It's on Gold Beach. So Gold Beach is the British beach there.
Yes.
And it's where you can see, so from our little gîte, which was adorable, and it was the most affordable place we stayed. It had a bedroom, a tiny kitchen, and a living room where the kids could sleep as well. And it was perfect. And it was right on the beach.
Wow.
And we had a view of Port Winston. So the whole the artificial harbor that the British built to supply the troops and the forces, that all the remains are still there. So you can see that. I'm sure people know this, but you can see it all out there. Just these iron concrete, structures out in the water.
Wow.
So that's exactly where we were. And it was the most beautiful, spectacular view. There wasn't a soul on that beach. There was no one there. It was wide open. It was gorgeous.
Oh. So maybe you'll have to send me a link to that gîte. So
yes, I can do that.
If other people want to book it, reserve it, that would be really good.
Yes, I'd be happy to do that. And
Yeah.
it was a little, there was one little quirk with it. We had to go get the keys in a different little village. I don't even know if it's a village. It was tiny, called Crépon, Crepon. And at a place there, which was a beautiful old, I don't know if it was a farm, but it was a beautiful old building there. And so we had to pick up the key there. So we discovered, though, that actually turned out to be a great thing. That little detour had us on these roads that we wouldn't normally have gone on. We would have gone straight up to the beaches, but this way we traveled through the countryside a little bit.
Yeah.
And that's where I sent you some pictures of the beautiful Normandy countryside, with the steeple of a church and just the farms and the fields, and it was beautiful. So that was a good excursion. It was, it seemed odd to have to go somewhere else to get the key, but it worked out great.
Yeah, well, that's France for you.
I liked it. I thought that was good. So we spent that time on, the night there. There's not a whole lot going on in that little town or village or beach spot. And then the next day was D-Day, and we did Arromanches, and then we toured, of course, the American Cemetery, which is just moving, obviously, very moving. We saw a lot of servicemen there. I don't know if that's every day or if it was because it was D-Day, but there were a lot of active military, and there's nothing more touching than watching active military stand or kneel and pay homage to, the unknown soldier or people maybe that they knew, or family members. It was a very beautiful experience, and the view,
it's nice from there, isn't it?
Oh my goodness, and the water looks like the Caribbean. It was absolutely beautiful.
It's not as hot.
No, not quite. Although we had warm days in France, which was good, but not like Phoenix. So we were perfectly happy.
Yeah, what time of the? Oh yeah, it was June. Sorry, I was going to ask you what time.
Yeah, it was June.
Yeah, June.
Early June. Yeah. So Normandy there was absolutely beautiful. We also did Pont du Hoc, if I said that right, where and that was fascinating. The boys particularly loved the gun batteries. They did the German gun batteries, and they were just
fun. They're fun to look at. You can climb on them. You can look around. You can hide.
Yes.
They're really nice.
And right. No, you're right. And when I say boys, I mean my adult boy and my teenage boy. They both were climbing around, and you get that sense of what it was like to have been a German on lookout. And these things are solid. I mean, all the craters around there. We were fascinated by that. They bought, I can't remember how much tonnage they dropped, and they couldn't destroy these things.
Yeah.
So
they
that was
destroyed some of
interesting.
them, but not all of them.
Yeah, no, not at all.
Is the thing. There were lots and lots of them built.
So we did Pont du Hoc, and we saw the film at Arromanches. There's Arromanches 360. So you have that big film around you. It was worth it. You have video screens high up. You stand in a room, and they're encircling you, and they show actual footage from the war, and that was very good. I thought that was very well done.
Yeah.
And particularly for kids, it's something that engages them because they enjoy anything video.
Absolutely.
It was good. That was nice. And then we did the Pont du Hoc. We saw a video about that as well. And that, of course, is fascinating because they, scaled 100 feet up that sheer cliff.
Yes. So were these videos that were just like standalone video experiences, or were they part of a museum?
Pont du Hoc was part of. It might have been part of the Utah Beach Landing Museum. I think might be where we saw that. Forgive me for the details, but we did go to that museum, and that was an excellent museum. Absolutely worth seeing. And then Arromanches 360 is in Arromanches, and it is just a theater where they have that 360-degree video.
One of the problems that I have with Normandy is I have seen some of the museums, but not most of them because there's so many.
Yes.
And it's really hard to decide, So it's good to know that the Utah Beach Landing Museum is good and that the A Romanche 360 movie is also good. That's a great
Yes.
recommendation.
You could spend a long time there, particularly if you are a history buff. You could spend a lot of time there. We passed museums, like as we were driving to the next museum, and
Yeah.
the kids are like, "Can we stop there?" Like, we don't have time.
Yeah.
There's a lot to see. You're right. I mean,
too many.
It's
too
hard
many.
to choose,
And a lot of them don't cost a lot of money, but they do cost time. And when you only have a few days, it's good to
Right.
select in advance and go
And
see
part
them.
of the experience is the scenery too. Just standing out, walking out on the beach was that alone, that takes time, but that's something you have to do. You have to just feel it and experience it and see it and imagine. We had that stormy morning, so we really got a sense of what it might have been like. Obviously we aren't anywhere close to experiencing the same thing, but
No.
it
But it gives you
we
an
got
idea.
a sense of what the weather was like. Yeah.
All right, Nancy. So I hear that you ran into a little bit of a car problem on your way to Mont Saint-Michel.
We did. We had, and it was completely avoidable, but it was just an error. And my husband, who is very particular, very meticulous, and very smart about cars, somehow put regular unleaded gasoline in a diesel car.
Oh, yeah.
And because green in the US is diesel, and so he just grabbed the green pump and put it in, and afterwards he was saying it shouldn't have fit if it were if it wasn't the right one, but it did. It fit just fine.
In France we don't have different sizes. In France you have to pick the right fuel.
Yes, you do. And I highly recommend
the same size.
I highly recommend that everybody pay very close attention to finding the one that says gazole, if I'm saying that right.
Yes.
But okay, so GAZOLE, that is the key for a diesel, and most cars are diesel, or that we experience for rental.
Yeah.
But it caused a problem. So we knew right away, because the car does not perform the same way as you drive away.
Yeah.
So we went back to the service station, and we found that not very many people speak very much English out in the countryside.
True.
So we relied largely on Google Translate, and we tried to we wanted to talk to someone at a garage and just see if he had a siphon, or he or she had a siphon that we could use to take the wrong gas out, and we could fix the problem quickly without, getting the rental car company involved and without doing damage. And before we know, there's an actual tow truck there.
Yeah.
And we really just wanted to call with a question, but he showed up. And so then we went back and forth with the lady at the girls at the service station were absolutely lovely and helpful. And but the tow truck driver was not very pleased with my husband. He kept calling him Tatu, which we did learn meant stubborn.
Yes.
So because he was trying to say, we just want to siphon it out. We don't want to tow.
All right,
but we ended up,
You don't want to hear this, but siphoning it out is not enough. Because if you ran the engine with the wrong fuel in it, it's now in the pump, it's in the injectors, and they're gonna have to do a lot more than just empty it out.
Yes, you are absolutely correct.
Yeah. So they probably swapped cars, right?
We found out the hard way. Yes. So we had to get towed to a little teeny tiny place called Pompe, Pompe. I don't even know where that is. It was the middle of nowhere. It was 10 o'clock at night. We've got our kids with us. We were on our way to Mont Saint-Michel, so we ended up getting a cab that got us to Mont Saint-Michel 10 minutes before the very last shuttle, because you cannot drive onto the island at all.
No.
You have to stop at the shuttle, and then you get on there. So we've got the very last shuttle over to the island, which actually turned out to be a really cool way to land there.
Yeah.
It was beautiful at night. Obviously, it's a spectacular visual with the light and the majesty of it, because it's on a rock. It's a giant, beautiful abbey on a rock. And that was gorgeous, and there was not a soul around. So got there, we had to kind of find our location for the hotel. We stayed in a hotel called Hotel Mouton Blanc, the White Sheep, and it had mixed reviews. We were off and on about whether or not to stay on the island, but it worked out great. And it was a little bit run down, but the views were spectacular. We had a view out one window that looked out to the bay, and it had a little bit of like a turret that we could see. It was very picturesque. And then out the other window, we were right at the base of the Abbey. So you just looked up the sheer side of the Abbey, and there was a little graveyard and church right outside our window as well. And then you could look up and see the beautiful Abbey itself. So that made it worth it for sure.
Yeah, that sounds like a good location. If not a great hotel, at least a great location.
Yeah, and the staff was fantastic. They were very helpful because we had the whole rental car situation to handle in the morning.
Oh, that's right.
Yes. So, but being there at night when no one, I mean, literally no one, we saw one man.
Yeah. And this is an important thing, the very touristy places. I think people need to consider sleeping there because places like Carcassonne, like Mont Saint-Michel, they get a lot of tourists arriving by tour bus. And these tour buses mostly arrive after 10, between 10 and noon. You have dozens of them. But then by 3 or 4 p.m., they start leaving. And by the time it's midnight, you have the place to yourself.
Yes. And that's exactly, we're dead on with that. That's exactly about 9:30. A large Japanese tourist group came through, and that was it. It was packed for the rest of the time that we were there. We left about 2 or 3 by the time we got everything settled with the car, and it was wall to wall. And they're tiny medieval streets, obviously. They're truly packed. Like we could not get out with our luggage without, knocking a few people over here and there. It was tight. You're right. It's very touristy. So
And so it's very important for people to, if you want to experience Mont Saint-Michel, I think the things that you have to do is arrive early enough to check in, especially if you're a photographer.
Yes.
Arrive early enough to check into your hotel so you get the golden hour, light. So you get there. In France, if it's summer, the sun sets pretty late compared to most places in the U.S. So most sunsets are going to be between, 9:30 and 10, depending on what day you're here. You can check that out anyway, the exact sunset. But you need to be there a couple of hours before so you can drop off your luggage and find a good location where you want to take your photos. And then the next morning, get up really early and do the same thing with the sunrise. And if you can explore through the Mont Saint-Michel at night when all these people are gone, it's heaven. Of course, the Abbey is closed. So you can't, the Abbey probably opens at 9, I would guess, in the summer. It might be 10. And it would be a shame not to see the inside of the Abbey. So you need to stay the next morning until, late enough that you can see the Abbey and then get the heck out because it's full of tourists.
That was the plan. You just nailed it. That was the plan. We were going to get there just in time for early evening, maybe get into the Abbey for a little bit if we could, or go first thing in the morning. But we got there so late. But it's still, yes, that's the way. If you're going to do Mont Saint-Michel, I would agree with you 100% that spend the night, have it to yourself a little bit. It's quite beautiful when you're there. It's quiet. It was gorgeous. And the was great. So they helped us out. Our next stop was in Loire Valley, and we were going to go on a canoe trip underneath Chenonceau. So we ended up not being able to do that because of the car and the timing, but I would recommend that to anyone too. It just looked so cool. You get in a canoe. It's a 2-hour, it's not anything too strenuous, 2 hours, and you go under the arches of Chenonceau on that would have been really cool.
Now, wait. You mentioned that you went to Saint-Malo as well, did you, or did you not?
We did, but only to get our new rental car.
I see. Okay. All right.
We get to do all the light we cannot see. We didn't get to do that tour of Saint-Malo. We saw the station and the car place. That was all.
Well. And you realize it's a French town.
Yes, it was busy, and there were, everybody was very nice, and it was a work day. It was definitely a work day, and people were coming and going, and it seemed great. But
so if you don't mind me asking, how expensive was this problem with the car in the end?
Well, we hope it's the end. We asked the gentleman at where we picked up the second car. He said normally it's about $300 additional to right and correct that problem.
Yeah.
And we're not the first people to have done that.
Oh, no. It's super common. It happens all the time. I'm sorry to say. It's very common.
So frustrating. Yeah. But about $300. So, and we rented an automatic. I know that manual is, more common, but we had done a manual in England and driven on the wrong side of the road, and so
that was a bit much.
we decided that it would be worth the extra, $10 or $15 a day to do that.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah,
absolutely. Oh wow, what an adventure!
Yes, it was.
Okay, so Normandy. It sounds like your kids enjoyed it.
They did, and like I said, my son is a big history buff, and my daughter, she is just up for an adventure anytime, anywhere. Yeah. And there's so much space, and there's a lot of climbing and running around. So for an 11-year-old, that was perfect. That was what she needed, and it worked out well.
And you did it really fast because you were not in Normandy for longer than 2 days, 2 nights, 3 nights?
Night and a day, really a full long day. And we would have easily done more, but you have 2 weeks and we wanted to squeeze it all in. And so we didn't have as much time as I would say. Days would be better.
And 3 days would be better. Is that what you said?
Probably 2 is plenty for kids. I think 2 is probably good.
Okay. And you mentioned a cider farm. Did you stop at a cider farm on your way or something?
Our first stop was in that little town Beuvron-en-Auge.
Ah, yes.
It was adorable. It was absolutely quaint, small town, the timber houses, and just very, very comfortable place. So that's one of the little towns in that region. And we went to a cider farm, Manoir de Grand Douai, and I'll have to send that to you as well.
Yeah, I'll put it on the show notes.
Okay. It was very informal. We thought we were going to get a tour, but we really just kind of showed up on someone's property. It was a big, beautiful house, and then the whole cider farm was there. And there was a woman there, and she did a tasting with us, but we basically did our own tour through the cider press, and we saw the casks and the barrels, and it's all explained. It was in English, I believe. Mm-hmm. The were in English, so that was helpful. Yeah. So we got to see it, but it was definitely a self-guided and very informal tour.
Yeah.
But it was so beautiful being out there. It really was just that house, the farm, and there was a little church. Yeah. And that was kind of all there was there. The tastings were great. We did the Calvados, I guess it's called.
Oh, Calvados, yes.
And we tasted that, and we tasted brut cider and then some sweet cider.
Yeah.
And I think that was everything that we tasted.
That's nice.
We took some for the road, which was good. That was nice.
Yeah. No, it's and so you had arranged that in advance?
We thought we had arranged it in advance with our person, but she kind of just sent us down the road. So it wasn't quite what we thought. She said, yes, and the owner of the bed and breakfast where we were staying, the owner has a cider farm, and we'll get you a tour. And I thought that is awesome. That's perfect. And the next morning she's like, oh yeah, just go down this way.
Yeah. Well, see, it sounds like this is the kind of place that lets people just show up and look around, which we have a lot of that in France. You go, you do a tasting, you buy a few bottles to take home with you, and you look around the place and you take some photos, and that's it.
Yeah. And we enjoyed that. I liked the relaxed part about that. That was very nice. And it was such an idyllic spot. You really feel like you're in the middle of the countryside.
Yeah.
So that was nice.
Last time I was in the US, I was actually surprised. No, actually, this is in Canada. We were and it wasn't last time either. Anyway, in Canada, we stopped at a winery, and I was so surprised how managed and planned the whole thing is. Like they expect you to come in and look around and they manage the whole thing. Like you pay a fee, but in France it's a lot more informal. Like you have some guy or woman who will talk to you a little bit and will have you try things, and you talk to the winemaker. Like not some sort of hired salesperson, but it's just the winemaker or the cider maker talking to you.
Yes, you feel like it's much more personal. It's much more personalized. It feels much better. You lived in California, I think, right?
No, and I lived in Utah for a long time.
So in California, it's the same way. We did some wineries there. Some, you schedule your tasting and you have these big tours. Some are smaller and much more intimate, but I like this style for sure. It was very relaxing and comfortable, and we didn't feel like we were putting them out either.
Oh, no, you're not. You're really not. They just have a person who's there to handle visitors. And that person probably does other things too. That person might be, the one shipping products or taking orders, or who knows, but it's very informal and friendly. Now we do have the bigger wine houses or possibly cider houses, although I don't know if there's any big ones where they have staff to handle the visitors, because those are the places where they get lots and lots of visitors. Like if you go to the champagne houses, that's unless you go to the tiny ones.
Mm-hmm. You could be overrun by people, correct?
Yes. They get so many that they can't handle, and you have to book in advance, and you have to choose the language and all of that. But most places in France, it's very informal, and you can just stop by, and if somebody's there, they'll show you around, or they'll tell you to go walk that way.
You're making me appreciate it even more. I mean, I really liked that. Yeah. It was very relaxed, and that's what we needed.
Yeah. All right. So before we end, let's talk about some advice that you might have for people who are considering going to Normandy. What would you recommend? How many days do you think is ideal? Well, you already told us. You said
with children, I would say 2 would be probably plenty. I wish we'd had more time in Bayeux. Maybe you could bump it up to 3, so you could do the tapestry and spend a little more time in Bayeux.
You didn't have time for the tapestry.
No, we went to the gift shop. Felt like we saw the tapestry, but no, we didn't actually get there in time to see the whole thing. Yeah. I don't know that my 11-year-old, I don't know that my daughter would have really, that might have been too much for her. A little too blah, a little too boring.
Well, actually, the tapestry is interesting because you are on a conveyor belt.
Oh.
It's because they want people to move at the same rhythm. And your audio guide will tell you things as you move along. I mean, the conveyor belt is moving slowly, but it will tell you. And it takes the actual tapestry viewing is maybe half an hour. I did it a few years ago. It's not that long. And I think even for kids, I mean, if it's a 5-year-old, no. But 11, 12, 13, I think that's... I think that would be probably appropriate, but you didn't have enough time. So you got to make choices.
Oh, it's so tough. It's so tough. There's so much to see. That would definitely be on my list to add in a little more time there. So 2 to 3 days probably for Normandy. I think in preparation, obviously learning as much history as you can. Yeah. We did watch with the kids. We watched Band of Brothers.
Oh, good.
And Saving Private Ryan for that piece of history. And that was they were both excellent. And Brothers, it was neat when we were driving through the countryside and seeing the names of these little towns where they probably filmed there, but where it all happened. So that was really helpful. And kids are so visual today as well. Not all, but most. And that was very helpful, I thought. and they brought it, they brought it to life when they were there. They could remember things that had happened in the movies, and they were like, oh, this is where this happened, or oh, I think this is where Major Winters did this, that, or that. So it was nice to have a connection. Then I think see as many of the museums as you can, and we wish we'd had more time around the D-Day activities. D-Day activities happen the entire month of June. Right. So, and the schedule online was not really clear. It was a little bit challenging to figure out what was going on when. So we relied on a brochure from a tourist information office in one of the little towns along the beaches. That helped a lot. Right. So it couldn't plan ahead as much as we had hoped, just for the big things like the museums, but for activities and events that were happening around D-Day, the military vehicles were everywhere, and I'm sure they're not there just on June 6th. They were everywhere, and they were great. They were so much fun. Zipping along the roads, every kind: German, American, French, British, and I'm sure that there were a couple of military vehicle events for sure. They were
probably, yeah.
So,
and those places, they have little they often have a little wooden house where there's a tourist information thing, and they have a lot of them spread around all these villages, and you can go ask for what's going on today or tomorrow or whatever.
It's very helpful. And they're easy. You're right. They're easy to access. They're usually right in the center of the village or the town. And then the beach towns, they're in all of those.
Yeah. And I think for you guys, because your kids are very active and all that, I think I might have tried to add, a boating something or other, or, spend a half a day doing some sort of activity around the ocean, or I don't know, fishing or horseback riding or something of the sort.
That would have been awesome. We would have done horseback riding had we had more time, for sure.
Right,
my dog is very big on horses and riding on the beach. We did see that was an option. Yep. It was a little research ahead of time. So I would probably dig a little deeper. That was, don't think that it's just going to come together quickly. I would say for advice for horseback riding, you got to do some research. And then,
well, that's why we do the podcast and have people like you who've done this before and have maybe, I wish this or that, because then it's easy. People can relate to what you did and see what else they need to add.
Yes. And we would have done, Honfleur. We would have done that had we had more time. And that would have been a great boating excursion or time in the harbor, that sort of thing. We would have liked to as well.
Honfleur is very nice, but it's kind of off. It's closer to Paris. I mean, closer to.
Right. We talked about staying in Rouen and doing that and going up to and then traveling along the coast. That was one option, but we really wanted to do the cider route. So it just seemed really charming and very quaint and very manageable. And so we opted for that instead.
Yeah. Excellent. Well, thank you very much, Nancy. That has been extremely helpful. Thank you very much. And also thank you so much for letting me talk to your son. I don't know if his episode is going to air before yours or after yours, but he was a delight to talk to, and obviously a great young man. So
he's a keeper. Yep.
Oh yeah, he's a keeper. And I'm sure your daughter is too. She's a little more shy, but that's okay.
Yes. Okay, good.
All right. Thank you, Nancy.
Okay. Bye.
Au revoir. Thank you, VJ Diesch, for signing up to support the show on Patreon this week. VJ is not really a new supporter, but he cut up his Amex card in a fit of rage and then decided to soothe his soul by signing up to support Join Us in France again. So thank you, VJ. I have no idea about the fit of rage, but VJ is a funny man. That's the least I could say. And thank you to all the patrons who support the show month after month. I want you to know how much I appreciate your continued support. To support the show on Patreon and learn about Lunch Break French, go to patreon.com/join us. patreon.com. Join us, JIONUS. N-U-S. And see, this is where I know I'm French, because I had to think before I said J, because J in French is J. So it's the opposite. Gives me a brain cramp. To hear all the ways you can support the show, go to joinusinfrance.com/support, where I give you several support possibilities. For my personal update, I am still working on updating the new Join Us in France website and hope to launch it before the end of the year. On the Join Us in France closed group on Facebook, I asked what I should name French regions on the new site, because there are so many episodes, they need to be categorized somehow, and it's trickier than it appears at first glance. The whole reason why I'm doing all this work on the website is to make it more usable and easier to find. 90% of the people who visit the site speak English, so naturally they type English words into the Google box. So I've decided to do this. I'll use the names of the capital cities of regions, comma, the name of the region. Some names of regions will have to be in English, because I would be an utter fool to call it Bretagne when I know that people are searching for Brittany. That's just a fact of life. So here are the details. I'm going to read out all the capitals and all the names of the region. So it's Ajaccio, Corsica. In French, I would say Corse, but in English, you say Corsica. Bordeaux, New Aquitaine. And in French, we say Nouvelle-Aquitaine. Dijon, Burgundy, Franche-Comté. In French, we say Bourgogne-Franche-Comté, but nobody will type Bourgogne. They will all type Burgundy. Lille, Upper France. And in French, we say Hauts-de-France, but honestly, that's a ridiculous name to begin with. Upper France is also ridiculous. I don't know. This one, I could go either way. It's not a name that's going to help anybody, I don't think. Lyon, Auvergne. So Lyon, Auvergne-Rhône-Alpes. Those names are very close in both languages. I just removed the E at Alpes. Marseille, Provence-Alpes-Côte d'Azur, which is the same in French, because Provence is Provence in both languages. Nantes, Loire Valley. In French, we say Pays de Loire, but yeah, Loire Valley is how English speakers will know it. Orléans, Centre Val de Loire. I'm going to leave that one the same, because again, that's one of those that I don't think a lot of people are searching for that. Paris, Île-de-France. And this is why I decided to put the name of the city first, because at first I thought, I need to put the name of the region, the name of the capital city. But people outside of France don't know that Île-de-France means Paris, so I've got to be clever about this. Then the next region is Rennes, Brittany. In French, it's Bretagne, but nobody knows that who speaks English. Rouen, Normandy in French. Strasbourg, same word. It's Strasbourg, Eastern France, and that's in French, it's Grand Est. And Strasbourg, I'm pretty sure, loses an O in English. I might have to check on that. But whether it loses the O or not, I'm going to spell it the French way. The city names are going to be spelled the French way. And then last but not least, Toulouse, Occitania, because in French it's Occitanie, but I think more people are going to be searching for Occitania. So I'm hoping that this categorization will help everyone find the episodes that they need. Another thing that's going on in my personal life is that my elderly standard poodle, my personal dog, has been very, very sick, and she is doing a little bit better. She's old. She's 13 and a half. And I'm very grateful that I have a wonderful veterinarian who has been able to diagnose this problem that she has, despite mostly working off history and trial and error. I have to say, veterinarians are just some of my favorite people in the world. So if you're listening out there and you're a veterinarian, thank you so much for all you do. I love you guys. And I know my dog isn't going to live forever, but yeah, I wasn't ready to see her decline that fast. And she's hanging in. The extra this week is a graphic to help you order your meat the way you like it in French. And it has a picture of the doneness and the word we'd use in French. So I think that'll be helpful to a lot of people coming to France. And again, to get the extra, you go to the website and you sign up for the extras. Or you can do it from your podcast app as well. The best way to connect with me is to email me, Annie@joinusinfrance.com, or search for the Join Us in France closed group on Facebook. I have added a few questions because I had so many spammers wanting to join. So please answer the questions, even if one of the questions is, what's the name of the host of the show? And I realize if you've only listened to one episode, you probably don't remember my name. And it doesn't matter. Just answer the questions to the best of your ability. And I can recognize a spammer from somebody who's just new. It makes a big difference. If you have feedback on what you heard on an episode or just want to talk to me about something, send me a voicemail. And to do that, you call this US number. It's 1-801-806-1015. This is the French tip of the week. This week's French tip of the week is kind of a silly expression that we use in French. C'est un casse-tête chinois. C'est un casse-tête chinois. And that means it's a Chinese headbreaker. So if it's a Chinese headbreaker, it means it's a complex problem. It's something that makes you think a lot. So, c'est un casse-tête chinois. Thank you so much for listening. Have a wonderful week, and I'll talk to you next Wednesday. Au revoir. The Join Us in France Travel Podcast is written and produced by Annie Sargent and copyright 2017 by Addicted to France. It is released under a Creative Commons Attribution, Non-Commercial, No Derivatives license.